What is up? Good to see you. Welcome to the Sixers Talk podcast brought to you by Wilmington University. WilMU Works. I hope you can hear us. I know you can see us, but we're having some technical difficulties. But we are live here from Rivers Casino. Ben Berry in the cut, making things work, as well as Noah Levick. I'm Danny Pommells. So glad you could join us. A lot to get to. The Sixers are a lot of housekeeping issues, as well as talking about the team per usual. But Noah, late breaking here at 2 o'clock, Shams Charania broke the news that James Harden has hired an agent, former Adidas exec Troy Payne. Of course, James will be a free agent in July. He signed that kind of 1+1 deal where he has an option to opt out. Before we get to the rest of the things going on, did you get caught off guard by that? Because he hadn't had an agent and kind of been doing his own thing, negotiating his contract. And that was famously what happened last summer with Harden and the Hamptons and Morey going up there to meet with them, supposedly. So did that catch you off guard? Should Sixers fans be concerned that Harden's trying to leave the nest, or what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, I know he's had his good friend Lorenzo McLeod helping him with, business and contractual matters. But yeah, that's not the norm in the NBA to be without a full-time agent. I think obviously James Harden has made it clear that he wants to be as well positioned as possible for the next contract, the next off season, and that a lot of that stuff is going to be reserved for down the road discussions in terms of how this year finishes with the Sixers and just how deep this team goes in the playoffs. So yeah, definitely anything with James Harden and his representation is notable, but obviously there is a long and good history with Daryl Morey, and provided the Sixers do everything they hope in the postseason, I don't think the fact that James Harden, has a team of agents representing him changes this picture in a great way. But we shall see, and I'm sure we will re-examine this months down the line.
All right, 37-19 are the 76ers. One game before the All-Star break, the Cleveland Cavaliers tomorrow night. And it's interesting because here we are with so much going on in the NBA. The Sixers, so much going on in the world of sports. The Sixers providing a bit of a cathartic win for Philly sports fans who suffered through the Super Bowl. The Sixers able to not have to go to double OT to beat the Rockets this time around. I was concerned watching them last night. Of course, there's the Brooklyn game. There's the Knicks game where they were able to also acquit themselves pretty well. But it's just that, Noah, it seems like, sometimes that lack of effort, we go all back to the Orlando game or, with athletic teams specifically, they kind of get, a little out athleticized at times, or, the desire, intensity, passion that the other team has is a little more intense and evident than how the Sixers might start the game or come out of the locker room in the second half. It was feeling like that way, particularly when Doc Rivers hit that all bench lineup out on the floor. But what do you think of how they played last night, considering those things I just mentioned, where it seems to be something that keeps showing up of them having these difficult times with these athletic teams, younger athletic teams?
Yeah, I think for me, just the rebounding was terrible in this game and has been bad this season. And Doc Rivers was honest in essentially agreeing with what I just said. I mean, they're, a bottom 5 team with offensive rebounding, bottom half with rebounding. And last night, the Rockets scored the game's first 12 fast break points. Now, they do crash the glass, very aggressively. They have a lot of young, athletic players who at least looked hungry while that game was still tight. But, man.
A lot of second chance points for them, too.
That's a ton, yeah. And some of it the Sixers will be okay with in terms of not getting many second chance points of their own, because the reality is they need to focus on being good enough with transition defense. But the defensive rebounding, when the Sixers' intensity and effort is lacking, that inevitably seems to be a strong indicator of it, that they're giving up a lot of costly offensive boards. Has happened in pretty much every game, I think, this year, against the Knicks in particular. And Brooklyn, was beating them in that category until late in the game. The Sixers, I think, refocused in the fourth quarter and rather improbably found a way to pull that one out. So they mostly have the team that they have right now, right? It's past the trade deadline. I do think it's fair to have some slight optimism that Jalen McDaniels could be helpful. He's athletic and long and rebounds well statistically for his position.
And has some ball skills too. He can put it on the floor a little bit.
Indeed, yeah. And, Dwayne Dedmon as well is a good rebounder. There are other reasons, to not be so encouraged perhaps by him now being a Sixer, but for a big man, he does gobble up a lot of defensive boards. And if the Sixers end up playing him, they will hope that trend continues for the 33-year-old big man that they have signed in the buyout market yet again. But they just do not want to lose games in the playoffs, obviously, because they are so much worse than their opponents on the glass. And yet I do think for the time being that remains a valid concern for the Sixers. So not a positive from last night's game, but nevertheless, clearly far more talented than Houston. And Jalen McDaniels was among the guys who looked good for the Sixers last night. Tyrese Maxey, also a strong night off the bench. And
26?
28
Harden.
in 26. I'm mixing up
Harden and Maxey.
Yeah, 54 for that duo. We can.
Well, wait a minute. You're going to talk about duos. Let's talk about trios. The third quarter was all Harden, Maxey, and Embiid. They scored all 35 points in the third quarter, which is the maybe not the scenario exactly you envision, but that is the nucleus, right? Those are the three guys you hope to be, driving the ship when it matters most for the 76ers. Regardless of who starts or who comes off the bench, those are the star players on this team, for all intents and purposes. And you mentioned Dedmon coming on board here in the buyout market, but that trade isn't official yet. The buyout isn't official.
That became official this morning.
Okay,
so he is a Sixer for the second time. If you remember back to the
2013,
first year of the process, when he was an undrafted rookie out of USC, he appeared in 11 games and gave the first sign that he might have an NBA future in that little stint. Obviously, he is past his prime, and the Miami Heat did not think he could help them in the second half of this year. But he's a 7-foot player, and the Sixers, did not go into this year with much size at backup center, and they will hope if he indeed plays that he can provide a little rim protection, hit the occasional three-point shot, or at least be respected as a shooter to the extent that he's guarded a little bit on the perimeter. And he is another name in this backup center mix.
I love that you mentioned if and when he plays, because there's already a bit of a logjam or uncertainty behind Joel with Montrez and Paul Reed. And we saw Montrez in garbage time really last night. But Doc Rivers' incorporation of Dwayne Dedmon and what he thinks of him and how he considers he can help the team is a very important factor. And I know you're hedging your bet a bit with how you're phrasing it, but do you see him having an impact and them using the McDaniels and Dedmon incorporation as a way to improve their rebounding prowess?
Definitely McDaniels. It's been funny because in various settings, Doc Rivers has been asked, what do you think about the trade? What do you think about how Jalen played in this game, that game? And his first words are, he's good, like every single time. So he's a big fan. His first impressions of Jalen McDaniels, and not difficult to imagine that the Sixers hand him, 20 plus minutes in a playoff game if the matchup suits him and he's knocking down threes, etc. I think Dedmon is much more up in the air. I think Rivers and the Sixers like the idea of PJ Tucker as a backup center in the playoffs, and rather ironically, Tucker was preferred at times over Dwayne Dedmon in last postseason by Eric Spoelstra, including in that Sixers series. So I think a lot of this will ride on Paul Reed's play. My gut feel is he continues to get some opportunities, but obviously the track record is that he doesn't have a ton of leeway in Doc Rivers' book. But, as of late, Paul Reed has looked good despite the occasional, erratic stretches, and I think shown promise yet again as a backup center candidate. So I have to imagine that there's some auditioning, there's some internal competition, and that in a month or two we'll have a better answer to that question. I think certainly the Sixers did not sign Dedmon expecting him to sit at the end of the bench, right? Like that wouldn't be a valuable use of this roster spot. But I think still questions to be answered in terms of whether that role is just handed to him, whether Paul Reed continues to be the number one guy for the time being. And I imagine the gym will speak on some of those matters, as Brett Brown was fond of saying. And of course, Dwayne Dedmon played for Mr. Brown very far back in the day. So I think he will understand as a veteran, he has to earn the role. And when he gets his minutes, he has to actually show that he's worth the roster spot, despite being more experienced than Paul Reed and more credentialed, at least in terms of the experience factor. Yeah.
There are two sides to every trade, of course, and we got a glimpse into what it's like and the potential of some players when they're gone. And we'll get into that after this quick timeout. But of course, we're brought to you by Wilmington University. Are you ready to build career skills in 2023? Apply to Wilmington University today and get started by March 6th. Learn more and apply at wilmu.edu. Upskill, reskill, or start fresh in 2023 with a degree or certificate from Wilmington University. WilMU works for you. Apply today to start March 6th. Of course, we're coming to you live from Rivers Casino here. And of course, you can always come down here on Delaware Avenue and rush to new rewards at Rivers Casino. Now there's a whole new way for you to earn, redeem, and level up your rewards. Get your new Rush Rewards card and get more out of your game at Rivers Casino Philadelphia. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Well, I teased the fact that there are two sides to every trade. And last night, boy, oh boy, let's give Jalen McDaniels' line of 8 points, 3 for 4 shooting. He did knock down the 3, 5 rebounds, 3 assists. There's nothing that I feel like we've seen from this guy to feel bad about trading Matisse Thybulle for him, because the length, athleticism, obviously the rebounding we talked about. He can guard multiple positions, still has a lot of upside. So he's excited about being on a team that's contending for something and has bona fide stars on it. So, and like Noah said, Doc Rivers likes him. So there's a bevy of things to be excited about with Jalen McDaniels. But sometimes there's a little buyer's remorse. And last night, Matisse Thybulle, man, he showed up and showed out. And a change of scenery sometimes is a thing. We talked about that in the last podcast, but Matisse was 4 for 6 from 3. He shot 6 threes, made 4 of them, 14 points, 6 rebounds, 3 blocks. One of them was spectacular in their Portland's win over the Lakers, where he closed out on Malik Beasley and swatted it like 6 rows into the stands. So talk about ingratiating yourself to a new fan base. Like, that was it. And he played 20 minutes, only made more than 3 threes once in 3.5 seasons here in Philadelphia, and that was his rookie season. So change of scenery, great. But also, Noah, the words Matisse Thybulle had to say when interviewed on the court and at the podium was that, it's good to be in a place where you're appreciated. And I forgot what it was like to be in an environment where I could just be myself, and just saying things that were just, I don't know, indirectly an indictment on his situation here in Philadelphia, where obviously it didn't work out. The fit just didn't quite happen, but it also connects the dots a bit to other players under Doc Rivers who haven't gotten quite the opportunity or development and chance to show what they can do, i.e. Isaiah Joe. So what do you make of all that as you take it all in? You see Matisse's performance, you hear what he said, and the current state of affairs with the 76ers. Hopefully this Jalen McDaniels thing works out, although he is an older player and not a guy who's coming in, 21, 20, 19 years old, like Jaden Springer or somebody who's trying to get acclimated. But what do you make of all that?
Yeah, I mean, just my first reaction was it was really cool to see, and you could obviously sense Thybulle's joy at being back home. Essentially, grew up
on the West Coast, yeah,
Washington area, and had an awesome first game. I don't think anything was mean-spirited about his comments. If you listened to his tone, but
seems being honest, and
definitely was
truth hurts sometimes.
Yeah, and I think so. Yeah, I actually, spoke to him the night of his last game, and I think he was still trying to think positively about, all right, I don't get many touches here, but I feel like I'm finding some creative niches, was the word he used. But also, he was honest about it being difficult with such a limited role. Now, of course, some of those limitations offensively are because he doesn't have a ton of offensive skill, but the limitations in terms of minutes, I think that's always been much more up for debate.
He started last night for Portland. So
started last night for them. Started a majority of the season last year for the Sixers. Did a lot of good things as a starter, and the Sixers going in another direction. Obviously, for he was really mature about that and make the best of the situation. But man, 12 minutes a game for a two-time all-defensive player, he was emphasized with some frustration and some relief when you feel that a mistake is less likely to lead to you moving out of the rotation or having the 12 minutes cut to 7 or 8. So yeah, I think some of it, can certainly be placed on the front office, the coaching staff, etc. And if in the event, right, that Matisse Thybulle is a grand success story in another destination, which remains to be seen. He had a nice first night. But yeah, as far as the way Doc Rivers manages young players, there's always been criticism there. I think much of it's been fair with Thybulle. For me, like he did show some flexibility this year. It started out as just this guy is a defensive specialist and we're all about two-way players. And then he saw, all right, there are little places where we can use Matisse, where we can put him on a star, where we can make him a weapon in our zone. But would more flexibility and more opportunities have been justified? Sure. I think there were numerous games throughout the year that we pinpointed of Thybulle got 12. This feels like a night it should have been 15 or 18. And Doc Rivers just doesn't tend to coach that way. He's a really competitive guy in the regular season. Once the game starts and the ball is, thrown up in the air, he trusts his gut. And his gut this year was that the Sixers needed two-way guys and players the other team respected as outside shooting threats. And Matisse Thybulle does not check that box. And you did see even last night, Thybulle got those shots because the Lakers let him shoot them. So remains to be seen whether he'll continue to hit them. Confidence has always been the huge question with him.
Confidence is huge as a basketball player, as an athlete, whatever, but especially shooting the ball. And whatever it was, the change of scenery, being home, he said they play the right way and stuff like that. But all things being considered, I don't know. It's just you have to have a little bit of that comes with the territory as a Philly sports fan. He was such a successful draft pick and had kind of broken a chain of like suspect and, picks that weren't quite home runs. So, but like you said, man, an incredible guy. You wish him the best. You hope he, hits the ground running as he did, and you hope that he has, tremendous success in the future. We saw his goodbye to Philly when he, spray painted "Thank You" onto the mural down at Front and Gerard. So it was just so cool, really classy, hell of a way to go out. But tough seeing that line and hearing him in such a joyous mood when we would hope that would be here with the 76ers. But want to pay some bills real quick, and we were always remind you that when it comes to law firms, it's important that you pay attention to Lundy Law, because if you're injured for over 70 years, Lundy Law has been the #1 personal injury law firm in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. Their services are exemplary. Their results are exceptional. Call 1-800-LUNDY-LAW to get the money you deserve. Also, opioid addiction is a national public health crisis. The Someone You Know podcast from the Independence Blue Cross Foundation offers inspiring stories that challenge stigma, offer hope, and humanizes the disease of addiction. Download the new season 3 of the Someone You Know podcast on all major podcast platforms. All right. Noah, I'm going to read you a stat and I'm going to get you to guess which player this is. Okay. And I'm going to start with their February 1st game. 7 for 10 from the floor against Orlando. 4 for 7 against Sacramento. 5 for 12 against the Knicks. 2 for 10 against Boston. 5 for 13 against the Knicks again. 1 for 9 against Brooklyn. 5 for 8 against Houston.
Yeah, I know. I was looking at this last night, so I do know this. It's Tobias Harris.
It is Tobias Harris, and I got a little bit more for you because it's worth noting that Tobias Harris, he averaged above 18 points a game in December and above 18 in November. So in January he was above 17. In December, let me get this right. He was above 15 in January, above 17 in December, and above 18 in November. So his numbers have declined as he's currently 9.7 points a game here in the month of February. His primary skill is scoring the basketball, but he's in a slump and a downturn that has, as I outlined, which I can kind of clarify again, above 18 in November, above 17 in December, above 15 in January, 9.7 points in February. What's going on? Is this an area of concern? Should the Sixers be paying more attention to this? And why is Tobias kind of in this downward turn where his numbers have continued to decline month by month?
Yeah, it's a mild concern for me. I think some of the production with points per game is circumstantial. Obviously, Tyrese Maxey, James Harden missing time. Harris took on a greater scoring load during those months or those stretches, and that's that. But him being around 30% for three over a more extended period, that's not great. You have ups and downs.
So you're more concerned there with the percentages than
the efficiency than the volume. Although I think those do tend to interact with each other with Tobias Harris. We've seen, I think, over the last week or two, some moments where there were open catch and shoot threes, and he didn't show off the quick trigger he worked so hard on.
Especially against Brooklyn. It's like a few shots he turned down. He had 3 points. Ben Simmons had 4, which opens up all this fodder for people to roast him about that. And he has had an up and down career here in Philadelphia where some people felt like he didn't deserve the money. Others felt like, he should have been traded or, shipped out at his peak. But I'm at the point here where so much of the Sixers season is focused on what they do in the postseason. He's got to show up in the playoffs. There has to be some moments where he balls out and helps this team win games. I think that would make everything better.
Yeah, and last year was a mixed bag. I think he was just fantastic in the Toronto series. Defensively is where he stood out, but there were some key offensive moments as well where he was just very confident in himself and efficient on the catch and shoot threes and took over here and there with little bursts in transition. But the Miami series, super disappointing. I believe the final few games of that series, he took 50 field goals and 0 free throws. Now that's harping on a weakness of his that realistically is going to remain one, just that he doesn't get to the foul line a lot. But yeah, overall, the Sixers are counting on him to be a 30, 35 minute per game two-way guy who's versatile defensively and can knock down the threes that are created by their stars, in addition to a little self-creation in bench-heavy lineups. Overall, lately, he's not been great with much of that. So I think, for him, it's just trying to mentally refocus over the break, get some rest, and recalibrate for the second half of the year. And a lot of it's just going to be make or miss with a player like that who has embraced the catch and shoot role and understands that that's going to be a large majority of his.
What about the missed layup shots? Do we need to focus on that? I mean, some people are,
Yeah, I mean,
I'm
I
saying
think,
my friends. My
sure,
friends are upset. That's
sure.
what I'm trying to say. I'm tired of people chirping in my ear about Tobias Harris. Some people who work on this podcast too, not currently seen, also have opinions about Tobias Harris. So, but yeah, man, it's
Yeah.
just you kind of want things to be. We're way past the halfway point here. One game before the All Star break, it'll go really quick through the month of March, and then the playoffs are here. So. Some new pieces they're working in. You hope the pieces that are here are thriving. Um, and Doc Rivers is leaning heavily on Joel and Harden to kind of drive this thing. So it's just, obviously Maxi's coming off the bench and developing, and it's just there's other areas where you hope that they can bolster themselves. But what are you working on for the website, Noah?
Yeah, so there's been a lot cooking. The Sixers have made a sort of end of roster move here. They've picked up Mac McClung on a two-way contract now, and I know we talked about him briefly. And just a reminder that he will be featuring Saturday night in the dunk contest
in the Rising Stars game, one of the
I
G
believe
League
so
teams.
as well. Yeah, so you'll be getting a lot of shine if you want to see what Mac McClung's all about. But yeah, story on that, and working on something as well with where Paul Reed now fits in the backup five picture. And he had some interesting stuff last night about how he's stayed ready behind the scenes, and he works very closely with Dwayne Jones, the former St. Joe's player, and said he sees him like a big brother, someone he leans on for wisdom about how to navigate all the difficulties of being in an internal competition in the NBA, and also, of course, a lot of on-court nuances as well that Jones has helped him out with. So that is on deck, in addition to the final game before the All-Star break, Sixers versus Cavs. Sixers going for 4 straight, and they'd love to knock down another win.
Potential playoff matchup for sure, or possibly. But we'll be with you every step of the way. Make sure you follow Noah on social media at Noah Levick and check out his work on NBCSportsPhiladelphia.com. This has been the Sixers Talk podcast brought to you by Wilmington University. Wilmington Works. For Ben Berry, I'm Danny Pommells. We'll see you next time.